Today on Coach's Corner, we're ranking the Big 10 coaches. I got On3 coaching insider Jesse Simonton with me. Last week, you remember we ranked the SEC coaches. Go check that video out if you haven't, because today we're focusing on the Big 10. All right, Jesse, here's your rankings. Jim Harbaugh tops the list. Ryan Day at number 2. You have newly named Wisconsin coach Luke Fickell at 3. James Franklin at 4. We see Matt Rhule making his debut in the Big 10, checking in at number 7. Mike Locksley there at 11. I disagree with you on that one. Tom Allen and Ryan Walters at Purdue round out the list. All right, Jesse, before we debate the top of the list, who on here has the most to prove in 2023?
I think one of the other guys that you kind of quibbled with the rankings, we were kind of going back and forth before recording, was Mel Tucker, and kind of where I have him and Michigan State's head coach kind of slotted above some other guys after they obviously went 5-7 a year ago. But when I'm putting these lists together, I'm taking both the past, the present, and kind of what I'm projecting for the future. And right now, there's only 3 programs in the Big Ten that are recruiting better than Michigan State, and that's the Blue Bloods, that they're competing with on an annual basis in Michigan, Ohio State, and Penn State. He continues to sign good classes. He obviously had the 11-win season that he was able to parlay, into a $90+ million deal. I think Michigan State's going to be better this fall. It was interesting that Mel Tucker made no staff changes. He's betting on continuity. And really, he's betting on that the transfers he's brought in, he's smashed the portal again, brought in a bunch of guys from a bunch of different Power 5 schools that he hopes is going to fix what has been, even when they were 1-11 games, one of the worst defenses, especially against the pass, in the nation the last few years. But I think the results are going to come where you can see him, potentially rise up this list. If Michigan State, sputters again next fall, have no issue with dropping him way down, and obviously the pressure will start to kind of heat up on him a little bit, even though he has this huge deal.
So the way that I read this, then, you're expecting a bit of a bounce back year for Mel Tucker at Michigan State, and do you feel kind of the opposite for Pat Fitzgerald and Mike Locksley then?
I do feel the opposite for Pat Fitzgerald. I think everything's trending in the wrong direction there. I even noted in my rankings, that it's almost unfair to put Pat that low because of what he's done, 17 years at his alma mater in Evanston. It's a super hard job, but they're just going in the wrong direction. They've won 7 games the last 3 full seasons combined. They won 1 game a year ago. That was in Europe. I joked in the rankings that he was the first coach in history to go 1-0 in Europe and 0-11 in America. They beat Nebraska in the season opener in Ireland, and it's just been really bad ever since. Mike Locksley, I continue to kind of be wait and see on that one. 8-5 was kind of, the best season he's had in his head coaching career last year. Talia comes back. They lose a bunch of offensive linemen and some skill talent, though. So can he maintain that success? I would say if he does, he will make the case that, Maryland's the number 4 program in the Big 10 East, and he'll see his name rise up these rankings.
All right, explain your decision to put Luke Fickell, having not coached a game in the Big 10, but you already have him at number 3 on your list. How's that working out?
To me, he's done more with less. At Cincinnati, he took over a waste-barren program, and within a couple of years, they were winning 9 games annually. He has 3 11-win seasons. Is the only Group of 5 coach to take a non-Power 5 school to the college football playoff. So when I'm kind of stacking the chips versus him and James Franklin, whereas a lot of Penn State fans kind of feel like James Franklin is maybe, under delivered on some expectations there. Hasn't won a Big Ten title since 2016, has really struggled, just 4 career wins against Ohio State and Michigan since his tenure there. So he's done a really nice job beating up on the teams he's supposed to, but now he needs to start beating those rivals. I think what Fickell has done, his resume, and the fact that he so strongly believes that Wisconsin, a lot of folks thought he would ultimately end up back in the Big Ten if Ohio State came back open, or maybe even a job like Penn State. But for him to say, hey, I might have bumped my head on the ceiling at Cincinnati, but I think I can truly make Wisconsin a national title contender. I think that speaks volumes, and I think he's a tremendous coach. I love the staff he's put together, and what he's done early in the transfer portal certainly suggests that he thinks Wisconsin's going to be ready to compete as soon as year one.
Nebraska's struggled for the better part of the last 15 going on 20 years, yet you have Matt Rhule here right in the smack dab middle of this list. What are your expectations for him at Nebraska? Do you think that he'll be higher on this list next year at this time or lower on this list next year at this time?
Yeah, that's a good question, Josh, because I do think Matt Rhule is really tricky to rank because he has taken over, unlike, James Franklin or some of these other coaches, he's taken over truly barren, wastelands. Right. Did it at Temple, 1-11, and then within 2 years, he had multiple 10-win seasons. Even worse at Baylor. I mean, that program was completely in the ditch, and they won 1 or 2 games the first year. By year 3, they had 11 wins. And so I think, I joke that he's, college football's Ray Donovan. He's kind of the ultimate fixer. That's his plan again at Nebraska. Things are not quite as dire up in Lincoln right now. So I think if he gets, the Cornhuskers bowling for the first time in 6 years, I could certainly see him rising up the list. If some guys behind him, the Mel Tuckers, the Mike Locksleys, who, some, have a lot of faith in, if they continue or show more promise with their programs this fall, perhaps they leapfrog Matt Rhule. So I thought 7 was kind of flat dab in the middle, considering what he'd done in college. And I think it's notable. He'd been out of the game for several years off to the NFL, and he's come back in. He's embraced a lot of the changes. College football doesn't look the same like it did when he left Baylor for the Carolina Panthers with the transfer portal, with NIL. But he's hit that on the ground running, and he's overhauled that roster. They have 40 some odd new faces this year. This is a big spring for them. I could see them going bowling, and I think you absolutely would see him and his status in the sport continue to kind of rise.
Yeah, a bowl game for Nebraska would definitely boost Matt Rhule in your rankings. All right, Jesse, let's go to the top, though. How close was the decision to put Jim Harbaugh at number 1 over Ryan Day? What tipped the scales for you?
I mean, I think it's pretty easy. Jim Harbaugh's beat him the last 2 times. Ryan Day is in a really unique position in this sport right now where he's lost, 5 games in his career, but he hasn't won the national championship that Ohio State fans want. He hasn't beaten Michigan the last 2 times, and he hadn't won a Big Ten title in a couple of years. And so despite all the wins on his resume, the Buckeye fans are having this existential crisis right now of, is he the right guy? I joked in a column a couple months ago, right after they played Georgia, that, he's kind of in this whole Dark Knight Batman situation where, he's not the guy Ohio State deserves, but he's not the one they need right now either. And it's really weird. So I think he's under a lot of pressure for a guy who, again, has lost 5 games in his career to beat Michigan in the Big House this fall. But that's a tall task because I think as good as Ohio State is going to be in 2023, right now Michigan and Jim Harbaugh have the better program. They return more talent, number 2, I think, nationally in returning production. They bring back a ton of studs on both sides of the ball. And the few holes that Michigan had, Harbaugh went out and grabbed, a couple plug-and-play guys from multiple Power 5 schools in the transfer portal. So if Ryan Day can snap that 2-game skid, it would surprise no one to see him leapfrog Harbaugh in the rankings. But right now, I think it was pretty cut and dry that Jim Harbaugh is kind of the king of the conference.
Yeah, all of a sudden, Jim Harbaugh there at the top. All right, Jesse, thank you for sharing your Big 10 coaches power rankings with us. I want you guys to chime in the comment section of this video. Do you agree, disagree with Jesse's rankings, and who would be your number 1 coach in the Big 10? Thank you for watching. Make sure you smash that subscribe button for me, and remember to check out all the videos on the On3 YouTube page.